grandfather engaged in a public oral debate on the time of the second coming of Christ. At that time, his opponent argued the following. First, he said the law would end at the end of time. That means even yet future to those of us living today. Next, in the same debate but in another speech, he said the law would end at the cross in AD30 at Pentecost. Finally, in what appeared to be desperation, he said the law would end in AD70. It is my guess that to this day he has no clear, consistent position for when the law of Moses really ended. After all the above, he argued for a future judgment based on Old Testament texts of Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verses 9 through 10, chapter 12 verses 13, and Joel chapter 3. These he could not fit in AD 30, which he recognized. He dared place them at AD 70, which was my grandfather's position. So his only choice was to make them future and give up his previously held premise in earlier debates that all was fulfilled at the cross. I'm sure this was a quite an embarrassing presentation for those espousing amillennialism and who held the same views. Even to this day, it is embarrassing to affirm the above three premises as all being true. Now let's look at Paul and what he said about the hope of resurrection and the law of Moses. Speaking several years after the cross, he said, "But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in its prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that they will build a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust." Acts 24 verses 14 through 15. One can only reasonably conclude that Paul's hope was that taught in the law and prophets. The quote is from Daniel 12, which speaks of the resurrection of the just and the unjust. Resurrection certainly for Paul was law-based and yet future to his defense before the governor Felix. Not until the law is fulfilled would the hope of resurrection be consummated. It is for these reasons one must reject the law and the prophets being fulfilled at the cross in AD 30. In like manner, we reject a yet future fulfillment of the law of Moses because of Christ's word. One jot or tittle would in no wise pass till all were fulfilled. From today's perspective, doctrine-wise, resurrection is a pretty huge jot and tittle. Compare also Acts chapter 26 verses 6 through 8, Romans chapter 15 verse 4 through 2, Course 13, 12, and Romans chapter 8 through 24. Our financially premise to everyone who believes to assist the you in understanding the Bible teaching on the end of the law. Consider a text upon which we will hope there is no disagreement. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. For the Jew first, and also for the Greek, Romans chapter 1 through 16. Stay tuned for our next segment when we will present a diagram on Romans chapter 10 verse 4.